do is we select topics that spark the interest and awareness in social diversity, ranging from arts, entertainment, and social justice at large, leaving our listeners thinking and saying, Lori G, yikes! YikesRadio.com. You know the this voice, Dante? Okay, guys. You know, normally I get the sultry sounds of my mentor, the Mr. Kevin Nash, but we're going to go ahead and get that little tune in. Dante, you want to do it or you want to pick it up? Okay. Yikes, yikes. Yacha. Hey, Sean, how you doing tonight? Guys, we're getting this train going. So what we're going to be doing here tonight on the Poetry of Justice Show, again, this is where social consciousness meets the arts, and we select those topics that spark the interest and awareness of social diversity, ranging from arts, entertainment, and social justice at large, leaving our listeners thinking and saying, YikesRadio.com. And so I'd like to go on ahead and give out honor to my sponsorship, which is Miss Lori Ray Fisher of Gingy Productions, an entertainment company. And then I also going to give a shout out to WMPJ Steelworks and APS Muscle Cars. Thank you so much for your vision and being a sponsorship here on the show. And so here tonight, guys, I'm super duper excited because I just like the opportunity to watch the spirit move and watch the blessings flow and how God works. And I just gonna give honor to God just because that's where the spirit is moving me right now. So last week, Dante, I know we're gonna go in hindsight to the last week's show, but I just want to give respect for what we have in the studio tonight. And so anyhow, last week I was at the house and God bless sent an angel, in my opinion, to the doorstep, right? And didn't know where this was going to take us, had no idea. And where Sean did they say they have not because you ask not?
That's right.
Right? We talked about John Thompson here. He's a great person to have on the panel. I've had the blessing to know Sean just almost shy. About 45 years.
Wow. Yes, man.
Yeah. Something to that. And so Sean and I always have very deep discussions, and they're all very centered in being centered. They're centered in spirituality and just human kindness, if you will. And so essentially, the fruits of the spirit and that concept. So just to let you know the type of company we're in tonight. And so I opened the door and there's this awesome guy at the door, and this person is canvassing and doing what they're doing, campaigning, and I'm like, yeah, this is so exciting because my sister and I, historically, we've always done of all of our political ties to home, Sean, as you know, the city of Compton. So, focus on our city. But with everything transitioned with mommy, and now we can kind of do things our own way. So it's like, okay, well, wow, let's do this. And so I said, well, let me let them know about what I'm doing. So we've got a radio show, and would you please be a guest on the show? And praise be to God, he said yes. And I was like, oh my God, look, guys, this is so exciting. But I want to let you know of a prophecy that we have on you.
Okay.
Right now, you are Councilman Al Austin.
Yes.
But at least 3 times in my conversations with Sissy, us prepping for the show, I've called you Congressman. So just so that you know, and then today, when my daughter, Sean, we're getting ready to leave, and my daughter's like, oh, Mama, today is the big show because you're going to have the congressman on. And I'm like, uh-oh, Miko, you prophesizing again, too. I said, so I'm going to let him know that. So maybe that's something in your future.
One step at a time.
Amen. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm very honored and blessed to have on our panel tonight, City Councilman, from the city of Long Beach, Mr. Al Austin. Woo! Yay!
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the opportunity to be here on the Poetry of Justice show. I got a chance to check out the show last week, and after we talked, and I was super excited about joining you this afternoon.
Were you? Okay.
And then you got that question, because I was behind the boards, I heard everything. What did you think of last week's show as a listener?
I got some laughs out of it. It was comedic. I enjoyed the music. The topic was provoking.
Okay.
thought provoking?
Oh,
Definitely.
Shauna.
Sean, did you listen to the show last week?
I was able to see a little bit of it, and I would have to agree with Al. Very interesting, to say the least.
It was entertaining though, right?
Yeah, oh
Yeah.
yes, very entertaining.
Okay, Lori, so there you
Well,
have
there
it.
you have it.
There
Yeah.
you have it.
It was quite different from us, different from our usual
Mhm.
platform. But I think there is a market out there, gentlemen, what do you think, that likes that antagonistic, controversial perspective?
I think that's what gets the attention and get people talking about the show, you know? Yes.
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 Good.
Yeah, I would say there's a market out there. I don't know if this is the right
This is a platform.
platform for it,
I know,
but I
I
definitely
know,
believe
I
there's a
know.
market.
That's
out
the
there.
answer I was looking for.
There you go. Yeah.
I'm keeping 100.
Yeah, it was a little, I didn't know what to do. It was just like, woo, the train just,
Well, I
It
think
took
the shows oftentimes take an organic flow.
yes.
And so you can prepare and you can have
Yeah,
notes and
notes.
you could have planned and have a direction. And sometimes the show just takes on the life of its own. And last week it certainly did do that. But it was lots of fun, lots of
Yes,
fun.
and we had a good time. So how are you doing tonight, Mr. Sean Thompson? If you could give a little bit about yourself and some of the community work that you constantly do, but the ones that you feel are most acclaimed right now.
Well, first off, I want to apologize for being a little bit late. 110 freeway and
I know you
we were not working well together, and so there was traffic from. 'Cause I come from Rialto, so from the 110 all the way up until the 10 freeway was okay, and then I got downtown and it was like, no, you're not going any further, any faster. So that was, what kept me from being here in a timely manner. So of course I'm always going to be apologetic, and I always got to give honor to God first for allowing for us to have this platform in order to speak. The last time, the last two times I was here, you allowed for me. Well, first off, you kind of gave a little bit of a history as you did now about our interactions, our growing up together. I actually lived next door to her uncle, and didn't know that. We kind of met in a different environment. She was coming from Davis Middle School, and I was at Roosevelt Junior High School. It was a middle school, it's now middle school. But anyway, we kind of seen each other, befriended one another, and then from that point on to this point, we've continued on. And then, of course, when I seen her next door to me, I'm like, oh, this beautiful little young girl coming next door to me. So from that point, we've always maintained friendship, and here we are today. And instead of me going back into a little bit about what I've done and what I do, I want to thank you for being where you are, and the platform in which you're holding for us and for others to speak.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. It means a lot to me, as you know. It just warms my heart. The Poetry of Justice show, Lori and I started it, Mr. Austin, 4 years ago now, Susan?
4 years.
4 years ago now. And it just really was the spirit of the living God gave me the idea and thought and to do it, and we would sometime not know what in the world we were doing, but we just kept doing it and just being faithful with it. But the point about it is where social consciousness meets the arts is it opens it up where we can pretty much talk about a little bit of anything and everything, but most important, those are things that are really very passionate to me, because I am a poet and a poetess and a writer and an author and creative. But then there's this other side of me, of reality, if you will, about crime and justice and punishment and the justice system and the criminal justice system and the lack thereof and the injustices. Then there's that part of me that's worked in Skid Row with the homelessness and Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority, and working with New Image Emergency Shelter for the Homeless with Linda and Brenda under their administration. And then from there to California Rehabilitation and Employment Program, helping ex-offenders. So I would go into the prison systems 3 to 6 months right before parole release date and meet with individuals to make sure that they had a pretty decent housing plan and then hopefully a home reunification plan in an effort to work against recidivism and bridging that gap. And so I did that type of work. That's me, that's Jackie, that's the passion. But sometimes when we're out there and the passionate work doesn't line up with college tuition and daughters getting ready for this and that, but you know, we all know that story, right? So it's just that back and forth. By faith in everything, I can do that here. You know, so my sister and I, we co-own a small production company, and that's what I was sharing with you, Mr. Austin, about bringing to the city of Long Beach as well. We did a production at CAL, Cultural Arts Long Beach.
Oh, yeah.
Our very first show that we did, huh?
Wow.
It was our
Poetry in motion.
yeah, it was our, we called it the Poetry in Motion Listening Explosion, I think it was. So I'm a recording artist as well, and so I have the CD called The Archer, and so it was our little release party. So we did that, and we had some of the local poets
Is
come.
that downtown on Pine over there?
Yes, 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 yes. So we just, you know, having some fun, and then Sissy and I, Lloyd, if you could tell Mr. Austin and the panel about GPE and your work in the city of Compton, Dollar High.
Right, we did, Gingy Productions and Entertainment Company is the brainchild of my sister, who dreamed of, creating opportunities, particularly in the community where we grew up. And so, I have worked at the University of Southern California since like my entire life, and I'm also an alum. And now my children are legacies, isn't that exciting? Yay! And I work in the School of Dramatic Arts at USC, and I serve as the vice dean for their school. And so when we look around the city of Compton, there wasn't a lot of emphasis or opportunity or outlets for individuals to kind of be in the arts. And we're like, hey, this is an opportunity. We have this beautiful Dollar High Community Center. Have you been to Dollar High? Isn't it great?
Yes.
Do you know it lies dormant most of the time? There's not much. Well, not anymore, but back then it
Chico
was
Brown on the
yeah.
CD, so that's
Mr.
the whole
Brown is
ballgame.
working. But
Mr.
then when
Thomas.
we did that, there wasn't a great deal of usage of the Dollar High Center. So we worked with the city to gain the opportunity to put on Compton's first live theatrical production. And so we brought production of The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison to the Dollar High Community Center. And our actors were primarily individuals from the city of Compton. And they hadn't necessarily acted before. We had one young woman who was entering her 50s, and she had dreamed about acting her entire life. She had raised her children and put them on their path through education, and she felt now's my time.
Mhm.
And we cast her in that production, and she was just amazing.
Yeah.
We had younger 18, 17, 16-year-olds that we cast, and we cast some professional actors as well. So it was a great collaborative process to bring energy, excitement, but most importantly, positivity back to our community. As all of you know, oftentimes when you turn on the media, there's not a lot of positive things that are happening within the walls of the inner city. And I'm just very excited that GPE was one of the corporations that was able to be a catalyst in working toward that change. And I am very happy to say that now we are seeing lots of things that are happening at the Dollar High, happening within the city of Compton, TED Talk series,
Wow.
lots of different things.
So what's next for GPE?
Well, GPE just had a planning meeting. We want to put on another production, and this time we are hoping, well, I am hoping and praying for the funding for A Raisin in the Sun. And I think due to our political climate, due to where we are as a society, I think Lorraine Hansberry's work would be great to remind those of us who know it well, but to also introduce it to a brand new generation that may not have heard about A Raisin in the Sun and be able to analyze that. So I have to say, though, it was challenging financially, budgetarily, putting on Bluest. We had a fundraising campaign, and I will never forget it. We
Oh
sent
my
out
gosh,
these
yeah.
opportunities, right? That's what you tell companies. You have an opportunity to be a sapphire donor, an opportunity to be a ruby donor. And it was Alameda Construction Company. They are wonderful. I love them. They sent us back a sponsorship, and they said, we're going to be the cubic zirconia level of donor. And I was like, I never thought of that level, man. I should have thought of that level. But we had some very generous donors that helped us put that on. So we are now brainstorming, looking for different ways of funding, looking for venues. Although the Dollar Hide is a beautiful facility, I don't think it's very conducive for a live theatrical production. They don't have a lighting board, they don't have lights that go into their stage, and their stage has one way in and one way out. And so it's really hard to bring in equipment, to bring in sets, and to have any type of movement and transition for the actors. So we had to create that, and that added to our bottom line as well. So if you know of any theaters in the city of Long Beach or city of Compton that would be open to please, hey, let us know.
I was gonna ask, I'm sorry, go
We
ahead.
can talk about it.
Absolutely, I would love that.
I was gonna ask you the question, in regards to location. And you told me that, or you just said that it was hard to do that because of the size. What about the high schools and, I'm sorry, what about the high schools, and Compton College? Would they be a viable location?
I think that would definitely be a viable location. We had talked briefly about Compton Senior High School when we were looking at doing Lewis, and Enterprise, I think was the other, right? And just in terms of their availability and their ability to allow us to gain access, that wasn't able to work. But I didn't think about the college, definitely, that would be great. Or even Compton High. I haven't been to Compton High, graduated from Compton High, but I haven't been there in years, so I don't know what their theater looks like now. But
But remember
yeah,
with
we'd
the
be
whole
open to that.
it was a huge scenario, Sean, with regard to security. Because the unified system school districts or the security of this in these time blocks. So Lori and I ran into like major trouble with the Dollar Hide staff because they were not accustomed to us rehearsing, because we would rehearse 4 nights a week until we could only
well, we're supposed to work from 7 to 10.
to 10.
But the security guard decided that we needed to be done by 9:30, so we worked from 7 to about 9:20.
Now,
It
is
was
that-
just really difficult to get that staff to.
Now, is it because they were closing up?
Which I respect,
Yeah.
absolutely, Sean.
Yeah, I was gonna say, whether because they were closing or because, they could not continue with the security there, because.
They wanted to make sure they were gonna be signed off for the overtime pay, like Mr. Austin was saying. And so, because of some of the dysfunction systemically, the gentlemen weren't, secure and know that, yeah, I'm gonna get paid for this overtime that I'm doing. So, you guys need to get out of here as soon as possible.
But we were grateful for
But
the
we
time
were thankful for,
had.
yeah, we
For
started
those-
feeding
those
them.
2
and
hours
it was
and
like,
20
okay,
minutes.
we were some
It's amazing
cookies,
what a
some
fruit
pie.
tray and a
It's a-
cheese and cracker tray can do for you. It can do a lot.
Little
definitely.
Danish.
You can have fat burger one night, so you never know.
Whatever it takes, right? It's for the community, for the community. So tonight we're talking about economic development of the Black community, and the title merges with your work, some of the information that you sent me, Ms. Austin, and then when I was blessed to know that we had you secured, I reached out to Sean, and then I was like, well, what do you want to talk about? Because I always respect Sean and his opinion, so what do you want to talk about, because we collab. And so he came back with pretty much the same language that you had, so I'm like, okay, this is the show, right? So this is it. So this is me splashing in the Black community, not just because it's quote unquote Black History Month, but, and I know you have several constituents, and I kind of pondered with that, because I'm like, is that like putting you in a box? And I don't want to put you in a box, you know what I mean, tonight, because I know Long Beach is everything.
I'm
you know?
unapologetically Black.
Okay.
Certainly, as an elected official, I feel like I have a lot of responsibility to help move the agenda and move the needle for our people, but all people. as
It's,
well. I mean,
okay.
I represent one of the most diverse communities in Long Beach. There's a significant Black population, but we have a pretty large Latino population, so Black and brown people, Cambodians, as well as Anglos. Everybody is in Long Beach, and so it's a diverse and very inclusive city. I'm very proud of that work, and it hasn't always been that way.
Okay.
Our history is pretty interesting. I was looking through some recent articles about the history of our city and where we live,
Mhm.
our community. It wasn't so long ago, 50 years ago, we wouldn't have been able to own homes in Bixby Knolls or the area of Long Beach that we live. The first doctor, the first black family moved into the Bixby Knolls community in 1958. They bought their home. The neighborhood association actually gave them money and gave them money above what they paid for the home and offered to buy it from them.
Oh, this sounds like a raisin
A
in the
raisin in the
sun,
sun,
doesn't
absolutely,
it?
so applicable.
Sounds like raisin.
Redlining was prevalent, and that family actually faced some trials just moving in and living in that community first. And so you think about that, you think of where we are today. 9 city council members in Long Beach, 3 of them are African American. We've come a long way. You look at our city management structure, we have 5 or 6 department heads, deputy city manager, assistant city manager. We have come a significant way, just in a short period of time that I've been on the city council in the last 8 years.
Wow.
So, we're moving the needle, and it's Black History Month. We're celebrating our community, we're celebrating our history. But we also have to look at what's next, and where we're going. And this conversation regarding economic development, particularly, and I think financial literacy is a big piece of this as well. Economic development is very, very important.
Financial literacy, Lori, this is where I'm going. Remember you had your specific questions about funding and a small business wanting to open, how can they start that infrastructure? Is that something that you would like to pose to Councilman Owens?
It is, I think, I was pondering, talking to my husband earlier about, okay, let's define economic development and what is that? And so he's like, well, I see it as creating opportunity, right? Creating jobs, creating environments where people are employed and therefore consumers will come, right? And I was like, okay, well, how does that tie or relate to entrepreneurism, right? And does it relate? And so he differed. He felt like, well, no, it didn't necessarily, Lori, because you could get a Starbucks. He equated it to Magic Johnson. Do you remember the Starbucks downtown Compton? Which I would go to every day, guys. But then it ended up closing down, right? So an economic development opportunity was created with lots of jobs, right? But then when Magic pulled out and Starbucks had their franchise back, they're like, well, no, we're not gonna do it. So Eric was saying that we need to kind of think about, if we're giving low interest loans to bigger corporations that come in to establish businesses, is there a part of that contract that says X% needs to be for minority people or employment for people within that community?
No, I think that's good. We're talking now a lot about, you heard the term equity, is what we talked about. Equity, in my opinion, was done away with through voter initiative back in 1996. And it was the California Civil Rights Initiative. It sounded really great, a lot of people voted for it, but it eliminated affirmative action, right? Affirmative action, particularly, and from my vantage point, government, right? Government contracts, education, anything related to the public sector. It eliminated our ability to do set-asides and quotas and make sure that we were giving a certain percentage to minority businesses or minorities, period, and opportunities. And so now we are, I think, in a new space where we're being creative and looking to, I don't want to say get back to necessarily quotas and numbers, but definitely providing opportunities opportunities for minorities to get ahead, right? Particularly Black folks.
Right.
And if you look at the disparities in terms of how colleges admissions have changed, that plays into this. That plays into this in a big way. Education is the pathway to success, right? When you look at contracts that are how contracts are awarded in the RFP processes through cities and counties and the government as a whole, those considerations are certainly given consideration, but they're not part of a mandate anymore. And so I think elections matter. Our involvement in the political process, understanding the ins and outs, the loopholes matter in a big way. We have to be cognizant and pay attention to that because that's where the advantage is. Right? Information is power.
It doesn't. It leads me to one other word, and I'm very interested in what you gentlemen think. Gentrification. How does that open the doorway?
What do you think, Sean?
Well, I think once you start building up a community or community is already built, depending upon the location, let's just say here in California, I believe that that's going to come.
That gentrification is going
Yes,
to come?
depending upon the location. For example, and the development of the city. For example, Compton has a ways to go before we really build up. I think Long Beach, certain areas of Long Beach are certainly much better in terms of the development than other parts of Long Beach. The entire city of Compton, if you look at the entire city of Compton, there are certain sections of Compton, for example, the area around Central and Rosecrans, that has begun developing in certain areas. I mean, a little bit better than, let's say, Long Beach and Alondra, for example. So that's just an example of areas in Compton that is beginning to develop and need, and again, you know, we're a long way from fully developing Compton to the potential that it should be, or that we would hope it to be. But when you look at places like, let's say, I'm thinking of, let's say, where the Fox Hills Mall was, and that area, that's a pretty, you know, it's already developed, closer to the beach area. Transportation, public transportation is near. Now you're starting to see, and we've really been seeing this for a little while now, gentrification. You're starting to see, you know, and let's keep what gentrification truly is. It's not just people that are economically doing well going into the areas that are not doing or not financially as well and moving in. We're talking about white people moving into minority areas that either has the potential to develop into a better community or have already been developed, and you know the property size and the value of the property is going up. And this is what I'm seeing in, let's just say, for example, the Foxdale, Culver City area.
Cole, are you still on the air? Hey, how you doing tonight?
Hey, Ron, how are you?
How you doing? You having a good night?
We're good.
We're doing good, Ron. What about you? You having a good evening? Oh, bless you, Ron.
Thank you, Rod.
You're so kind. Thank you, so kind. And Long Beach now, we have a councilman in the office, Long Beach, so thanks, Roddy Rod.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank
Rod.
you for the compliment, we
I
appreciate it.
know, no, it's
So
good.
I wanna just say too,
Uh-oh.
I got a lot of love for the city of Compton as well. I've got a lot of contacts there. I work with the council. I'm a labor rep, union rep by trade, and I've represented the city employees in Compton. So I know that city pretty well. And, I work with the council members and the mayor there, on a regional level to secure resources for the city. If it's from the state, the federal government, we're all in this together. I mean, Compton is a border city to Long Beach, and so we want Compton to be successful as well. So, it's gotta be a regional approach.
I like
So,
that.
I have a question, getting back to the gentrification, because this is an opportunity for me to learn and grow, right? Because I don't know much about that. So I understand your explanation, Shauna, what you shared with me. But I have a question about these companies that come in. If there's this law that passed that says we can't put quotas or percentages, right? So we can come and we can get the big Starbucks and the big, I think there was a big thing in the news about the In-N-Out burger, that, the new one that went in Compton, and the percentages of people that are employed there. How do we stop them from running us out of our communities?
Can I say something?
Please.
Alright, so gentrification, so our understanding of the word is displacement. It doesn't mean just because white people move in, it's gentrification. Because with the population growing, you know, it's probably gonna be happening, our communities are gonna become more diverse. So what gentrification is when people are being displaced from their homes. So since the white people are moving in, or anybody's moving in with middle class money, and the middle class businesses start coming out, and the businesses that have been there start getting pushed out, that's gentrification. Not the act of moving in, just the displacement of people. So if someone can't afford to rent there and they're displaced, or the businesses can't afford to rent there and they've been there 40 and 50 years, that's the displacement, not just the act of people moving in.
But
Well-
I could probably keep my job if I could keep my home if I could get a job. Go ahead, Shauna.
No, I'm gonna agree with you in terms of that particular definition, however, and we're talking about upper middle class, okay, because here's the problem, there's no poor anymore. Most politicians, as you know, don't use the term or word poor, it's either middle class, or rich. Poor does not exist. So, going back to the point that you were making, how many upper middle class black people move back into an impoverished community? You don't see too many people who do well, who's doing well, moving back to Compton. And so the reason why I use that and being specific, because whether or not we want to speak the truth or not, and I'm not saying you're not, because I know what you mean, you're giving the definition, but truthfully so, we're not talking about the upper middle class black men and women moving back into the lower income communities. We're talking about white people taking advantage of that particular community and the value and the resource that can and in many cases are already coming into that community. And that's why I say white people, because for me, I don't see, again, being repetitive, I don't see many black upper class people moving back into the inner cities.
So, getting back to the gentrification mode and, that conversation, I'll just tell you that, as somebody who's run for office on 3 different ballots, if you tell voters, I wanna run to keep everything just the way it is, you're not gonna get elected, right? And I've worked on many political campaigns and seen many folks run their campaigns and message to voters. Nobody has that message. Everybody is talking about improving quality of life, improving public safety, bringing economic development to the community, improving housing. And when you're successful in actually doing that, oftentimes you're accused of being a gentrifier, right? And so there's a balance that needs to happen. As a council member, I mean, I've been part, and our council has really focused on, taking on this issue, but, it's a large city. I was former aerospace worker, that's how I came to Long Beach, and so I worked in aerospace, Donald Douglas and Boeing, and I saw thousands of middle-class jobs leave our city, and so we had to adjust. Much of the policies that we are putting forth nowadays, when it comes to contracts and awarding contracts, we put a preference on local, right? That means at least, okay, local people are gonna get the first look, right, in terms of, you know, whatever it may be. When it comes to building our city, right, we just did an amazing civic center project, built a new city hall, a new port headquarters, a new library, we're transforming our civic center. Any public property, we have now what's called a project labor agreement, that for any contract worth $500,000 or more, right, we put a local hire provision on that. And so it says that at least 30% of work will be done by local labor, right? That helps us, that helps our community, that hopefully stems that tide of toward gentrification, because now we know that people, middle-class families are gonna be able to eat. And yes, we do have poor families, we do have low-income families that we need to lift up as well, and we're looking to do that every day. So I wanna just say there are policies that can be put in place to deal with, ensure that local folks actually are participating and benefiting from the wealth that's being generated, and community benefits are coming out of these projects moving forward. Housing is gonna be the big piece.
So I was gonna ask you about.
That's gonna be the thing that, or the issue that most cities are focused on right now. And the RENA numbers coming from SCAG and mandated by the state are pretty extraordinary. And so every city is going to have to increase their housing numbers. Low income, affordable, market rate housing, workforce housing, all of the above is going to have to be generated. We have our population and our projected population growth is we're not keeping pace with that with our housing stock that we have now. This is why rents are so damn high, right? This is why the housing stock is so thin. The pickings are so thin, and so with that, we're gonna have to be very cognizant about not only creating the housing, but also having the jobs that allow people to pay for the housing that they have. The market is really out of whack right now here in California, and I don't even know that our traffic and congestion in our freeways and streets can absorb what the need is really is, and will be in the next 5, 10, 15 years.
So there was like a lot of renovation down in the old Pike area in Long Beach, right? It's just really great and beautiful now. And then there's a lot of little, I don't know, what do you call them, townhouses, or, you know, all the little new housing and things that came into play. So when you speak about housing, that housing was it affordable for the people who were in that community? Did it push people out of that community? Is a percentage of that development low income?
Most of the downtown housing is not. We had what's called a downtown plan that was put together prior to me joining the council. That was a planning document that allowed for a whole lot more new housing and more density to be developed in downtown. If you want to develop density in most cities, you want to do it in the downtown area because it makes a lot of sense. It's set up for it a little bit better. We do have several and have put through several affordable housing developments throughout the city. I would say mostly in the central area of the city, and that's where you see a lot of that happening now. There's construction going on as we speak, but we don't have enough. We probably need to build another 5,000 plus units in our city to meet our affordable housing needs. I will say that we're considering a policy coming up in the next few weeks called inclusionary zoning, right? Inclusionary zoning is one of those policies that says, okay, on new private development, right? When you're going to build 160 units, then a certain percentage of it needs to be set aside for low-income housing, right? And you'll see these policies happening more and more with cities, to deal with that issue of, going back to the G word, gentrification, ensuring that people can live where they have grown up, or if they're displaced, there's an opportunity for them to come back and actually be into a housing situation. And to me, that is a model that needs to be explored a lot more, because a lot of what we're talking about is, okay, affordable housing, and everybody in the housing development is low income, and this is gonna be what it is. And to me, that's a model that we've kind of explored before, right? And so if you have a inclusionary policy, you have middle-class families, middle-class neighbors, and you're low income, you're seeing and experiencing something different, right? You're seeing somebody getting up and going to work every day, and their habits are a little bit different. And perhaps that is the model that brings up the lower income households moving forward. And I'll just say, I think, so much when we talk about building affordable housing is all about rental stock, right? That also keeps people suppressed as well, because we need to figure out how to have low income families buying into and owning their space, right? And building wealth so that their kids can go to college and they can have financial security moving forward and participate in this great golden state, right?
Right. That dream that they told us.
Yeah.
Well, I want to piggyback off the question that was posed. Going back to the Pike area, the residents that was there prior to the development of that area, because I used to go out there when we were little, we would go out to the Pike area all the time, on the bikes from Compton, to the Long Beach area, to the Pike area, to be exact. And there, at that point in time, there were black residents, black family members, and people who had lived there for a very long time. Now that the area has been developed, my question would be, those houses, or the lofts, the townhomes, the property that is now being lived in that area, I'm sure the value of those properties went up, correct?
Yeah, values of properties all over the state. are
Correct,
going up. Yeah.
right. So then the next question in that area, leading back to the point I was making earlier about race, was there a larger portion of percentage of whites moving into that particular area?
So, I don't have the numbers on race, right? I do think we're talking about economics and income, right? I do think younger folks with higher incomes certainly have populated our downtown, right? That's just a fact. Again, they're of all backgrounds. They're black people, they're Latinos, they're folks from all backgrounds, Asian Americans as well. But again, like I said, we're a diverse city. I would say that, and I wouldn't argue that there hasn't been some displacement. We know for a fact that there has been, and we are being thoughtful and trying to do all we can to address those issues with new policies every day. Like I said, one of them is that I know one we'll be considering is inclusionary housing coming up.
Right. Well, Long Beach is, as you were saying, it's been diverse, and it's a large city compared to Compton. And I don't want to stay on the gentrification. I didn't even have anything for gentrification. But okay.
She didn't put that in the
right, she went there like, oh, gentrification. okay, wait a minute, it's not in my notes here. But because she said that, and going back into the realistic point that I was making, not using, let's say, Long Beach, but say Compton, for example, where we're not as diverse. And the majority of our citizens, our community members, or people that live in the community are Black and Latino. So if we're talking about gentrification of an area or a city that has very minimal, maybe point whatever, 5% white, whatever the number is, then going from a 0.5% or whatever the number to, let's say, 20, 30, 40%, then there's a huge influx of a race going into a city that at one point wasn't developed, then gets developed, and then people, whether it be, again, it's not going to be a Black person that is doing better for him, his or herself, moving back into that community, unless it's fully developed. Crime has dropped, the educational system has gotten better, and so on. Usually it's someone who feels that they can take advantage of the people that are, likely to move out and offer them, a decent amount of money for that property, because they see the value long term in it. But anyway, we can move forward. I just want to make that point, and not using Long Beach as an example, because again, it's very diverse.
Right.
And that city has been developing for, like you said, prior to you being there. Compton has a very long way to go in terms of development. I don't look at the outskirts of Compton, for example, the 91 freeway area, which has been developed with, a storefront or a center around there. I'm talking about the center. I'm sorry, the center, the downtown area, the center of Compton. That's the area that should have been developed a very long time ago. And as I said once before, I don't know if it was here or not, when you have a store, no disrespect for Superior Market, but when you have a store, a grocery store like Superior Market being your main market in the middle of your community, it says something about your community and the development or lack thereof.
So there are some solutions that may be coming forward. When we're talking about economic development, and hopefully we're talking about solutions. The federal government, for better or for worse, recently put forth new legislation that created what's called opportunity zones, right? And I think there's going to be significant investment in these opportunity zones that have been established by the federal government, and I'll say established through legislation, and then the state kind of identified some of those low-performing, disadvantaged communities throughout the state. And so they looked at census tracts. I'm certain that the Compton is part of that. I know North Long Beach, in my district, I have 2 opportunity zones. And major investors are looking at coming and building affordable housing. They're looking at coming and investing in retail because they get tax forgiveness. Right?
That's the incentive.
Right, that's the incentive. They're incentivized to do that. And so I would just say, I don't know that that's the savior. That's going to be the panacea to fix, some of the challenges, particularly in the communities we're talking about. But I'm privileged to some information, and I'm privileged to individuals who are coming in and inquiring about these areas and saying, hey, I'm looking to invest in these areas. I want to build housing and retail and mixed-use development, and low income, affordable housing. So there's going to be some opportunities coming up, not only for the city of Long Beach, but I would believe for Compton as well.
I just have a question, kind of circling back to financial literacy, right? And your point of saying that affordable housing is a big issue, right? But it's mostly rent-based, right? So let's get you a rent rate that you can afford and that you can live. a part of these initiatives or opportunity zones, do they have some type of financial literacy component? Are there workshops in the community to talk to families about how to begin to plan to be homeowners or to be landowners? Are there opportunities for training for small businesses that are writing RFPs to be competitive to get that particular bid? And just listening, I don't think, as you said when you started the discussion, education is the key. When we know better, we can do better, or we can show our young people that there are opportunities that they may never see. I mean, I grew up in a Compton where if you lived on the west side, there were some people who had never been to the east side. I mean, Compton ain't that big, right? But that was a reality. People who attended Dominguez High School never knew what Centennial High School looked like because it was all the way on the other side of the city. So I'm just curious about that. I don't know. I know here on the Poetry of Justice show, we talk a lot about our community, a lot about our obligation, a lot about how we can, as individual citizens, help to change our community, like taking ownership of that. Has anybody ever looked at formalized financial literacy?
Well, there are a number of individuals out there, nonprofits and organizations that do this work, and I think they do good work. Sometimes it's we got to seek it to get that information, to get it, and I think we need to look at just systemic change, right?
Yeah.
Systemic change from our K through 12 system, right? You know, how many kids are taught real economics and taught about
Never learned that,
ever? You're not even taught it in
That
college,
takes
right?
Ever, I keep.
I mean, so much.
Unless you sign up for Econ 101, right?
So much of what we do and how we invest and spend money smartly, and even our healthcare, right? Our own wellness. A lot of that can be addressed through
Yeah.
K through 12. Changing the system,
Right.
changing the mindset, changing the way we think, and I think there's some value there. I mean, certainly, as a local government official, I want to sponsor workshops and make this information available to my constituents and community. But also as somebody that's worked in the labor movement for close to 30 years, unions could do a better job of providing this information to their members as well, because so much of what we do is based on what has always been.
Right.
We've got to move forward. We've got to change. I'm okay with changing the system and changing thoughts.
Well, I think, and I agree with you, I think that life skills should be taught from elementary up until high school, whether it be every grade or every other grade. Life skills, conflict resolution, anger management, how to create a good family structure, teaching love in the schools, of course bullying. All these should be within a subject and not being taught after school, not being taught in a supplementary program. I think it should be standard, just like math and English, just as part of what I've done. I've been in education, that for, over 30 years now, running programs, consulting for school districts and so forth. And that's something that we don't have as a permanent system. Math and English, history, science, physical education and so forth has been taught in the system since the inception of education. And we don't talk about things that would be valuable or more valuable or just as valuable. I don't need to learn the chemical elements of water versus how to, have a good life 10 years from now, or, learning more about credit scores and how it's going to affect me in the long term. Things like that should be taught. And of course, everything should be grade appropriate. You don't teach a third grader building relationships or couples in third grade, you learn that in high school. But these are things that I think should be taught, and it should have been taught a long time ago, not just in the inner cities, but cities throughout the United States of America, because this is very important for us as a people to develop, grow, learn, love one another. Culture is definitely not taught. There's still separation in terms of race, and I know people wonder why I continue to bring that up, but it does matter, just like education. I was looking at the school systems, for example, 2016, 2017 breakdown of students per race, based on race at Cal State Dominguez.
Okay.
There was 7% white, it was 10% Asian, 13% black, 60% Hispanic. These are just a couple. Cal State Fullerton, 20% white, 21% Asian, 2% black, and 43% Hispanic. Cal State Fullerton, for the last, I believe it was 10 years, it's been it fluctuates between 2 and 3% black. UCLA, 27% white, 29% Asian, 3% black, and 22% Hispanic. And I can go to the other schools like SC and so forth.
What are they for
But-
USC? Just out of
Okay,
curiosity.
SC was 40% white, 21% Asian, 4% black, and 14% Hispanic. Now, right, now across the
That's
country,
very sad.
yes, it is extremely, and I can go into.
Because I know personally from SC, I worked in admissions, oh my gosh, for 22, 23 years. There was a time that SC was at 13%,
Wow.
and our numbers have been declining.
Right, and then we have to
But our
also,
Latino numbers are rising.
I'm sorry, we also have to consider the fact that
Wow.
at least a percentage, at least 1% are athletes going into the school system. So they're just not kids that are doing well academically. These are kids that are needed by the school systems in order to fulfill those athletic positions. Okay. Again, not trying to make a huge point about race, but it does play a part in society across the country, not just in Compton and other inner cities. And like I said, if we're making up 13% of the United States population, and yet we're only making 2% of the schools within our community, or 7% or 11%, let's just say, I think it was 13 at Dominguez Hills, which is the next city closest to Compton. And I also have Long Beach, for example. So these numbers are very important. So if we're gonna talk about going from, talk about improving economically, we definitely have to consider education as the most viable, most important part of us growing as a people and improving as a people. Because if you don't have academics and you're not improving in that area, how do you expect to get the jobs that are, especially in 2020, that are gonna be viable to live? Or you understand the point, right?
I do. Wow, we're doing a lot of talking here tonight on the
We
Poetry
are.
and Justice Show. When we come back, guys, what we do, we take a little bit of a break.
Okay.
Lori does what is called our little mid-show shenanigans, but it's time for us to kind of like change out some of the equipment and all that. But when we come back, it's all about you. We're gonna have you tell us all about the campaign and what that feels like, and cause I wanna know, okay? Okay, and then we're gonna get water, juice, but we're gonna be back here on the Poetry of Justice Show with Jackie Ray Phillips here on YaksRadio.com.
Yikes.